Namaste, Om, Namo Buddhaya, Buddham Saranam Gacchami, Dhammam Saranam Gacchami, Sangham Saranam Gacchami. Welcome, and I'm glad to be with you. This is Reverend Dhammaratna. I'm coming to you from my hermitage in Central North Carolina. I've been asked to share a presentation about Buddhism, about Buddhist practice, looking at contemplative life, contemplative spirituality through the window of Buddhism. I prefer isness, the beingness rather than an ism. The Buddha was not a Buddhist, but he was practicing a spirituality and a manner of inquiry that led him to an enlightenment, a supreme type of enlightenment. And that's brings us to what we want to discuss today. There are so many practices and so much wisdom in the world that's available to us right now. We have the teachings of sages from many ages, masters, avatars, prophets from many religions, many streams of influence. All this information is available to us today. We don't want to be like someone counting the saying is counting cows or counting other people's cows. We're not collecting, at least in this conversation, let's not be collecting another set of ideas. We are inspired by the lives of the sages. We're certainly informed and inspired by the light that comes through all the different religions, but we don't want to be just collectors of the experiences of others. We want to have direct experience. The Buddha Dhamma, or Dharma, is mostly, you have become familiar with the word Dharma, is a Sanskrit version, or we say Dhamma, in the earlier Buddhist traditions. But Dharma in general means truth, or means teaching. So in a general sense, it's talking about the reality or the trueness of something, not just the trueness in intellectually reasoning something to be factual and accepting it mentally, but the trueness of it in its essential nature. So there's the Dhamma of truth, of reality, and then there's the Buddha Dharma, which specifically points at methods of inquiry and investigation to get to that truth and to look within ourselves to find that direct experience of truth. It's said in the Buddhist scriptures that the Dhamma is inviting one to come and see. It's present in the here and now, and it is to be personally experienced by the wise. The Buddha set out, he left a life of comfort and a place where his needs were met, a life of prosperity. He had family, he had children, he had wives, lands. He was a well-to-do person, and he set out to discover why human beings were caught in a cycle of despair, birth, death, and suffering. And in doing so, he abandoned all of that home life and all of the provisions and things that we all of us, most of us, hopefully, watching this broadcast, enjoy. And he set on a life of deep and severe asceticism, abandoning all the comforts of life and practicing most austere and rigorous types of yoga and meditation that were available to him in his culture, and still persist to this day in Southern Asia. But it wasn't that practice itself, meditation, that led to discovery, but it was the inquiry into this causality. It was the stripping down of life to its basic essentials that allowed the Buddha, brought him to a place of clear seeing where he could understand causality. And causality is understood in the terms of the Buddha Dharma. The causality is understood in called dependent origination, or specific conditionality. Reality has characteristics that can be observed, can be understood, and one of those characteristics of specific conditionality is that from ignorance come formations, and formations give birth to consciousness or support consciousness. This was one of the main discoveries that the Buddha made. And with the existence of this causation is the chain of birth, death, suffering, and so forth. So we want to look at that in terms of what is human being, what is human experience, and what is suffering. Let me digress for a moment just to say that human being, our human life, isn't just a narrative of our relative experiences. It just isn't, it isn't alone the story of who I am and what's happening in phenomenal existence moment to moment. We relate to these things, we relate to what's happening to me, and of the Buddha, that most of human nature sees existence in terms of being and non-being, and is caught in the concepts of being and non-being. But Buddha found what he called the way of the middle, which was causation. And another way that is described is the Four Noble Truths. And I will enumerate all those Four Noble Truths the way they're expressed in the Pali Canon. Stress. What is stress? What's stressful? Aging is stressful. Death is stressful. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair are stressful. Association with the unbeloved is stressful. Separation from the loved is stressful. Not getting what one wants is stressful. In short, the 5 clinging aggregates are stressful. This is called stress. That is what is. The first noble truth is what is. What is the origination of stress? The second noble truth. The craving that makes for further becoming. we're going to speak about this. We're going to have a discussion about this further on in the broadcast. But craving, some people use the word desire, and Buddhism is often criticized by casting desire in a bad light. But desire was why many of us are here. Desire is why we want to discover the way out of suffering and the way of liberation. So it is not desire itself, but it's the craving that makes for further becoming. It's the craving, the energy of attachment that keeps us on the wheel that rotates from one experience to the next, sustaining unpleasant experiences. So it's the craving that makes for further becoming, accompanied by passion and delight, relishing here, now, there, etc., craving for sensuality, craving for becoming. I want to be a spiritual person. I want to be a doctor. I want to be rich. Craving for non-becoming. I don't want to be poor. I don't want to be unhappy. You see, are you with me? Craving for non-becoming. So these are concepts of being and non-being that we vacillate between one and the other, and we find ourselves in a cycle of behavior, and it's our interests, our passions, our beliefs about our experience that keep us reaching and craving. And this is called the origination of stress. Wanting reality to be something other than what it really is. What is the cessation of stress? This is the third noble truth, cessation. The characteristics of reality, the characteristics of conditioned reality, can be seen as there's always an arising, there's something occurring, a formation occurs, and there's a sustenance, there's a sustained presence, and while there's a sustained presence, there's subtle changes going on during the sustained presence, and then there's cessation, then there's the fading away. So one of the characteristics of reality, of conditioned reality, of the condition of suffering specifically as it's being mentioned here, is cessation. The remainderless fading and cessation, renunciation, relinquishment, release, letting go of that very craving. This is called the cessation of stress. This is another way that this Dharma, the Buddha Dharma, is visible in the here and now. Many of us, many human beings, have never actually experienced letting go of something. Perhaps we've had it torn away from us. For example, losing a loved one, losing something we love, being separated from something we love. That's one of the aspects, one of the definitions of suffering. We've had that torn away from us. But we had a deep, passionate, an intimate way that we were attached to that person. And that snatching away was very difficult for us. Let's look at something more subtle. uh, for an object, for an example of an object, driving a car. All of us been in a situation where traffic has been very stressful, and it's been a demand on our attention, and we can feel that in our body, in our mind. Perhaps, there's a clenching feeling. We're actually clenching the steering wheel, and our knuckles are becoming white, and we're really very, very caught up in the stress of that moment. And when things calm down and we relax, we release our hand from the steering wheel, and we realize how tightly I was gripping that thing. It's a sensation of letting go. You can't have a sensation of letting go until you really have released yourself from it. I was trying to explain in some simple terms meditation to someone. Meditation, and we'll get into this in a few moments, but meditation, the process of meditation in and of itself is letting go. The practice of meditation is coming to that most essential nature of presence without concepts, without ideas. It's the relinquishment, at least in some sense, it's a temporary relinquishment, but we relinquish our interests and our frustrations. We relinquish our involvement with our activities and settle into the most simplest, direct experience of reality that's possible. I was trying to explain this to a person in India who did not speak my language, so as poorly as we could, or as best as we could through an interpreter, I had to use metaphors and different symbology. But I likened it to something that was very familiar to him, was carrying a large bag of rice, and the rice is heavy. Maybe you've carried a bag of fertilizer, dog food, something like that. This bag is heavy, the grain is shifting around in the bag, and you're carrying it on your head, and you're really involved in the experience. You're really embodying this experience of the burden of carrying this rice. So I illustrated the point that what you're coming to is releasing your burden. You're actually getting the physical sensation from within yourself of letting go. And you've done this before yourself. You've let go of a bag of grass seed or rice or potatoes or whatever it was. You set that bag down, and it had a life of its own, but when you set it down, it settled into a position, and that was a very palpable experience for you. Very ordinary, perhaps. But imagine this body as like a fist, if you will. You're tightening around an experience, and it's sensed in various ways, in various depths of your being. And like the bag of rice, like the bag of potatoes, you're placing this in its most stable and restful position. And once you've done that, there's a sense of release, of letting go. It's just being what it is. Now I've gotten a little ahead of myself. We're talking about the third noble truth, which is cessation. And in meditation, we're modeling this experience of letting go, till we come to the place where we've actually relinquished something. We can't really appreciate the space, the volume, the weight that was imposed on us because of what we were holding on to. So let me go through this again. The noble truth of what is. This is conditioned reality. What is the origination of it? In this case, stress. What is the origination of stress? What is the cessation of stress? Is the remainderless fading and cessation. Renunciation. When I say this word renunciation, does it evoke any kind of reaction in you? I'm assuming that many of us who've joined together around this broadcast, who have been listening to teachings, who've been practicing different spiritual practices, have come to the end, have become weary of a lot of searching and a lot of holding on to things and believing in things. And this idea of renunciation, how does it sit with you? Does the thought arise within you, I have to give something up? What is the vitality and the sensation in your mind and body right now when I say the word renunciation? Relinquishment, release. I just want to have a conversation and look together and let the fire of our intention, let's let the fire of our attention do the work. I'm not asking for some heavy lifting. I'm not asking you to learn some new doctrines, to add some more information to your burden. But let's don't count other people's cows. Let's don't live in the spiritual experiences of other people. Let's look inwardly and have a true sense of letting go. And I think a lot of us, many of us, are very excited about the spaciousness and the freedom and the possibility. Many of us are seeing what's possible with the cessation of stress, with the third noble truth, with the cessation of what's keeping us in a cycle of dissatisfaction and hunger. The fourth noble truth. And what is the way of practice? What is the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress? Just this very noble eightfold path. Right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. This is called the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress. Now the words used are right. We use the word right, but what we really mean is not right in terms of, it does mean right in the terms of correct, or as opposed to wrong, opposite, the two opposites. Then we have the polarity that we're experiencing as a result of being in this body. But I want you to think of it in terms of being orthogenically efficacious What does that mean? When you feel right view in your body, when you feel right intention in your body, there's a palpable sensation, not like an intellectual belief, well, I'm right because I have formulated these concepts in a reasonable way that someone should believe. When the Buddha spoke of right view, he spoke of a way, a method, a modality of conduct that supported clear seeing, the support of wholesome actions that had not yet arisen, that discouraged the arising of unwholesome formations, and deprived the unwholesome formations that had already arisen of their food, of their fuel. So again, part of our suffering is that it is being fueled, it's receiving nutrition because we're hooking it up to life support. We have it on an IV. Believing in a view that this is me, this is I, this is myself. This is what we resort to. And this is what the Buddha called wrong view. This is the wrong response to suffering. So there's a duality. We're caught in a duality. We're caught in a concept of being and non-being. From ignorance come formations, and with formations there's consciousness. Consciousness is supported by something, by some formation. And this is what we're looking at. The formation that we're primarily concerned about here is name and form. With name and form come the 6 sense bases. Our form is derived from the 6 great elements, or you may know 4 great elements. There are earth, temperature, air, water. And the Buddha also enumerated space and consciousness as 6 elements. So the body is derived, it's constituent from those elements. And the name, which we really get from a Pali word called nama, which means inclination or leaning towards. We have an inclination toward the 6 sense bases. There's seeing, touching, smelling, hearing, tasting, feeling. Did I say feeling? Feeling, hearing, seeing, tasting, touching, and intellect. So that's name and form. With the marriage of these two, there's a conceiving, there's a pregnancy, there's a potentiality for the generation of formations. For example, there's the I, and there's form, and there's consciousness at the I. The meeting of the three is contact. With contact, there's feeling. And with feeling, there's craving. And what was craving? Craving was the energy that propelled the origination of stress, the second noble truth. So at contact with the sense base, be it the eye, the ear, touch, or even the contact of the mind with an intellect, there's a reaction. And often we find ourselves at the place of, what's this experience? By the time I've called it suffering, I'm already involved. Something has already taken place. So we want to back up a few steps. We want to take time to look deeply. And this is the nature of Buddhism, of Buddhist practice, of taking the time to look deeply. This is the meaning of meditation. This is the meaning of contemplation. It's taking the time to look with the most essential, the barest, and most elemental aspect of seeing that we can, to get closer to beingness itself, to lessen our reactivity, to lessen our involvement, and to observe this process of dependent origination. Of ignorance produces formations, formations produces consciousness, and here I am, I have consciousness of some suffering, some experience. There was a great modern sage who said, you're not experiencing suffering, you're suffering your experience. The Buddha long ago said it another way. He said, a man is struck by an arrow. Imagine the agony, the pain. But then he's struck by a second arrow, a second dagger. And that is the concept of who is suffering. Immediately you want to end the suffering. You have a resistance to it. You want to turn away from it. You want to get away. You want to run. You want to go. All of us, friends, some of us, most of the beings here and around us are running away or running towards something. Who'll get this arrow out? Oh, first I must find out, let's see. Well, who was the inventor of the arrow? Where was he born? What was his belief system? What was his philosophy that led him to create the arrows? And so forth and so on. So when we're suffering, we don't need what we don't need is to learn more ideas, to learn more doctrines, to learn more philosophies. We want to go to the essence of what this suffering is and understand how we are being held. I often say we're being held by our own grasp. by our own grasping, we are held, and by our own aversion, we're misled. The Buddha had many ways of investigating suffering. We talked about the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, and there's plenty of time to go into that in more detail. But the most elemental experience, or the most elemental method of investigation that all investigation is based on, is called mindfulness of breathing. I hope that you'll not just intellectually try to understand this message or this practice, but I hope that right now, in the very next few minutes that we only have a few more minutes together, but that you'll actually engage in this experience. I know we're not sitting here together, but in wherever you are, whatever you're doing now, you're breathing. And mindfulness of breathing, actually, the word mindfulness comes from the word recollection. The ancient language, it means recollection. Consciousness has been dispersed. We've dispersed ourselves in many ways. There's the analogy of a monkey swinging through the trees. He holds on to one branch, swings to another branch, and so forth, and roams through the leaves and the canopy of the forest. The Buddha said, it would be really easy to believe that this body is not ourself. Just because it gets old, it wears out, obviously dies, and intuitively we really know this body is not ourself. We look in the mirror, we preen, we dress up, we want good appearances, but really and truly we know that this is not a permanent existence. But the mind, the Buddha says, is a whole other thing. And this nama-rupa, this name and form, is the marriage of the mind and the body. And out of this marriage of the mind and body is conceived a concept of being, that this is me. This is I am. This is who I am. This is myself. So the Buddha said, if we just believed it was the body, we could easily perhaps overcome that erroneous belief. But the mind is another thing, because it's constantly supported as like a monkey swinging through the trees. It's constantly involved with some interest, some activity, something it's holding on to. It has to hold on to one branch to swing to another branch. We love to fill our space up with stuff. We love to be our activities, and all that's fun. All of that also is the blossoming and the evolving of human consciousness, of the ineffable. In this costume of name and form, the ineffable is expressing itself and interacting with itself and abiding in radiant self-knowledge, wearing the mask of humanity. And through this aperture of name and form, through this aperture of mindfulness, of Buddhism, of spirituality, of contemplative life, this aperture is open at this very moment there's no distance really to be traveled through this aperture. We can see in the present moment what truly is. And so kindness, friends, kindness, mindfulness is recollection. Mindfulness is bringing all that dispersed energy, that vitality that is in here. We'll be closing soon, so please stay with me. This vitality, middle-aged folks, we know when we were very young, the vitality renewed itself. I want you to get a sense of that this vitality is moving through. It's not contained. It's not bottled up. No one knows where it comes from or where it begins, where it ends. This vitality is moving through us, and as older people, we know it's not regenerated as often. But yet we do so much delight in dispersing our energy into things that are temporary, that are conditioned, that are subject to suffering. Herein, another aspect of investigating reality. All things are impermanent. They're conditioned. They are selfless. That is to say, they're not believing in themselves, or there is not found in them, in their essential nature, something called a self. There's some vitality being expressed. There's some consciousness being expressed. In a flower, we come close to a flower. The flower is radiating its beauty. It's beyond words. We try to breathe and get the essence of what it is, but all we can get is the story. The flower is tall, the flower is beautiful, the flower is purple. The story. We keep getting the story. We want to touch the essence. So, mindfulness of breathing. Let me cut this short. Mindfulness of breathing. With me for a few minutes. I know that you're having to listen. But in your own mind right now, come to a place and settle your breathing. With the sound of the gong, let's just take a few breaths. Let's put our palms together. You can close your eyes if you want. This is just going to take 3 or 4 minutes. Settle into the most natural breath that you possibly can. And don't concern yourself with any other things. Don't concern yourself with thoughts or surroundings. Just be with the sensation of breathing. Breathing in, I'm aware. I don't need the story of who I am. I don't need the history of my experience. Just breathing, I understand the quality of my breath. Breathe with me. Just understanding the quality of the breath. At first, you may have to compel yourself to keep your attention there. You might be thinking, I want some more lofty truths. I want to learn some deep spiritual truths. Here's the deep spiritual truth, my friend, that this is the present moment, and there's nothing separating you from your mind's ideal. Is it the end of a difficult path, or is it simple recognition? What is being recognized in the breath? What is the sensation? Is there heaviness in the body? Is there lightness in the body? Breathing out. Breathing in, I feel heavy. Breathing out, I feel light. The breath is the meditation. The breath is the investigation. The breath is the understanding. Please remain breathing with me for a few more moments. Feel the sensation of breathing with all the parts of your body, starting with the hairs on your head. Work down through the body. There's the breathing in. There's an energetic sense of presence, of I am, I'm here. Breathing out, I relax. This is the most important thing. It's what we forget in spiritual practice, relax. Breathing out, I relax. Breathing out, I let go of the bodily formation. I'm letting go of the bag of rice. I'm allowing it to settle down. Just this is the end of suffering. Do we sense that we have a grip on life? Does the mind want to run hither and yon? Does the mind want to run away from this experience? Do you feel a sincerity? This is the quality. This is the quality of the breath. Look at the quality of the breath, just with the breathing itself. Not an idea. Just be with the quality of the sensation of being in your body. Beginning with the head, move down through the body. Move down into the chest. There's a cycle. There's a rhythm. If we remember an old story that said man came from the dust of the ground, from the elements of the ground, a man was put together and the divine breath was breathed into him and he awoke. If that's not so hard to believe, can we accept that this is a model of the universe? When I say that this is a model of the universe, whether we're just beginning our practice, keep breathing as I speak. Breathe and watch and investigate what is form? How does it originate? What is feeling? How does it originate? What is relinquishment? Things that come and go while we're breathing. We're watching them come and go, so they can't be us. Breathing, the awareness of breathing, is the recollection. At the very least, it's the model. We're modeling the experience of that original breath, that sacred breath that comes in pairs. All breaths come in pairs, except the first one and the last one. Do you remember the first one? I don't want to use too many guided imageries here, but imagine the first breath, the first rushing into your body, the aliveness and cessation that must have been there. If you can't remember that, let this be your remembrance. Let's come back to that freshness in the present moment. We're talking about aliveness. We're feeling aliveness. Mindfulness of breathing. Breathing in, I become sensitive to my mind. Just recognizing that there's mind. Thoughts come, thoughts go. There's consciousness in the body. Our attention wants to go to one place or another, but just stay here. Don't get involved with those things. Sometimes we need that mind, but we don't need it now. We just need the illumination right now that we sense in our heart. Do we sense lightness? Is there a sense of resistance that there's places that inside our experience, inside this sensation that are too uncomfortable for us? Breathing out, just let go. Loosen our grip. How tightly this body grips this life, feeding on the thoughts of the mind, believing that this is me, this is I, this is myself. I must grip this so tight. Breathing in, I'm sensitive to that knowledge, and breathing out, relaxing, letting go. What comes and what goes cannot be what we truly are because we're watching it. So this is the nature of mindfulness of breathing. Set yourself erect in a comfortable position, relaxed but alert. Doesn't have to be lotus position. Just sit comfortably and alert. Dispense with whatever activities or priorities you have on your mind, and just let the breathing speak for itself. Or as in Zen we say, let the world speak for itself. Things may come, things may go, they're not you. You're the boundless sky and the things that are passing through the formations. You don't have to know. It's just weather moving through. Become sensitive to the mind. Become sensitive to the body. Does this feel sincere to you? Just come to the place of your original being. This is what the Buddha did. He came to the place of original being. With this name and this form, we've taken on identity. And we've gotten a grip. We're grasping onto life with our fists clenched tight. Mindfulness of breathing, we're relaxing. We're letting go. We're relinquishing that grip. There's the letting go, the remainderless fading away of that very craving that I want reality to be different than it is. I want to be this. I don't want to be that. The Buddha said that this craving is the instigator, the propagator, the one that's kept us on this chain of birth and death, of creating and believing in experiences. Thank you for breathing with me. Just let the fire of your attention just stay with the fire of your attention and let it consume everything that's not originally part of you. It doesn't belong to you. And the path will appear. The path that will arise for you, the Eightfold Path will arise for you. Now I'm going to sound the gong. And we've already run out of time for our conversation today. I hope that we can investigate in many different ways together spiritual inquiry, finding out what is behind these eyes. What is this essence that's looking out from behind these eyes? Lots of many different ways of investigating that the Buddha taught. But what's essential is the mindfulness of breathing, that you get a palpable, authentic sensibility in yourself. Sometimes we think our spirituality is here, in the head, in ideas. And we borrow this idea and that idea. We're collecting this doctrine and this belief and believing in this angel or this prophet, collecting all this stuff. There's a place for that, okay? We're not criticizing that. Let's just don't add to our burden. Let's let go. Let's be what we really are in this present moment. So many paths of investigation. The Buddha taught very many. But the mindfulness of breathing, without breathing, can you do a mantra? Without breathing, can you pray Lectio Divina? Can you do yoga? Can you do astrology? Nothing. There's nothing you can do without breathing. It's the most essential thing. Breaths come in pairs. So, there's the in-breath, the out-breath, the first breath, the last breath. Were we there for the first breath? Let's be there for the last breath. Well, thank you so much. And I hope that you'll make this food for contemplation, that you'll employ. I know I spoke a lot. I said a lot of things. But I pray that you'll sit quietly, just with the breathing. Sometimes we think it's all in our mind and that the spirituality's in our mind and that the body's down here just by itself. But sometimes we find that things are felt with the mind and understood with the body. So, I just leave you with that and pray that you'll investigate the Four Noble Truths within yourself, in your moment-to-moment experience. Take time to sit, take time to practice, but moreover, what you feel and realize, let it be part of your everyday experience. And I hope to see you again soon. Namaste, Om, Namo Buddhaya. God bless you. Thank you. And until we see each other again,